Hi guys, and welcome back to the next in a series of videos about Comfyui, and well, I think we are getting closer to being able to call it film making. What we are going to discuss today is upscaling. Yes, I did promise that this next video would be Dialogue Part 2 about improving on what we did in Dialogue Part 1. But that proved tricky and still needs more research, so upscaling it is. Let's do it. So what we're looking at here is the first frame I made, and if you recall the previous videos, we started out creating this with Phantom workflow.
Right.
We then took it to a Uni 3C workflow using Magraph and control nets and got new camera shots.
Right.
Then we went into Vase and mucked about with it until I had my characters put back into the new shots, and that gave us the start point base image for new over-the-shoulder camera angles. And in the last video we ended up making dialogue with those camera angles. It wasn't the best, but it was fairly easily done, and we'll be working further on that to improve on it in the not too distant future. Now let's talk about the trials and tribulations of upscaling.
What you are looking at here is the final upscale version, as best as I get it, on a 3060 RTX 12GB VRAM GPU with 32GB of system RAM.
I could of course take this to H100 servers and beast it into perfection. Why don't I do that? Okay, well, a number of reasons, and I think they are worth discussing briefly. Most of us are on low VRAM machines, and as time goes by, the devs in open source are coding the fancy new models that China kindly drop on us into something that we can make use of.
If all of us were using top-end GPUs and renting expensive H100 servers, then they would not do that.
So, in part, I am driving this from the cheap seats to support the cheap seats. I believe the future of movie making is the future of democratizes visual storytelling. And just think back when we danced naked round campfires at night and got a bit wildebeest with our native selves. I think storytelling should be put back into the hands of the community.
Yeah.
The tribe, so to speak. Because that is where we learnt our lessons, storytelling and the campfire. Not because some green-haired goose in a production studio decided I needed to think women could fight and beat men in hand-to-hand combat. To wrestle back control of that narrative from the idiot doofuses that have taken it over, we need to keep production cheap. I think within 1 or 2 years we'll be able to make budget movies full length on our Ho PCs. That is why I do this, and don't rush out to buy the latest fancy $6,000 GPU. That is also why I support open source and avoid the subscription packages. In short, I don't like or trust big tech and corporates. I certainly don't want them controlling the movies I watch, or that I hope to eventually make.
Goddamn noise.
So, enough of my politics. Let's get on with upscaling it. So let's explain what we are looking at. This is a 1080p video that is 1980 by 1080 size video. It is running at 24 frames per second and is 5 seconds long. And then that goes in reverse. Now, first thing to say is that it is not true do you want 080p? It is, but it isn't. I got this to 1600 by 900 during a proper upscale process, but the bump up from there to 1980 by 1080 was a not so proper upscale process. What do I mean by that? Well, let's rewind time to the start of this process, and I will walk you through what I currently do to get this result. Now, before I do, many of you have probably noticed two things. Firstly, it ain't all that. Secondly, that dude on the right looks nothing like my dude from the video, and I am not just talking about the black eyes. And you would be right. Well spotted. That is because for the final process, after the upscale and before I interpolate to 1080p, I would have to use Vase again to push the characters' likenesses back into the shot. And as you guessed, I just could not be asked to do that. But if we were aiming for production quality,
We would have to. Boring? Maybe. But let's face it, it takes a lot less time and effort to do that than it would to book 3 actors, a film shoot in the field, book the van, deal with insurance, wait for the right weather, hire all the clothing, hire a food truck, speak to their agents, and blah blah blah. You get the picture. It may be work, but we have it quite easy compared to real filmmakers.
Say 5 minutes of waffling and that finally gets the point.
Here are my first frame and last frame images. Let's start there. I mentioned elsewhere that I had to use Krita to cut and paste high quality characters into the distant shot. I did that by cut and pasting this shot into that shot. Let's have a look at that a little closer quickly.
Now, even though the sequence when I finally use it in production will go from distance to moving closer, I create it in reverse because I need the Comfyui models to pick up on the best possible high quality image from the start. Hence why we start with this frame and work backwards with the FFLF workflows to get to that frame. I was going to talk about the process before the upscaling bit, but it made this video too long, so I have stripped that out and we'll do a separate video on the FFLF first frame, last frame method another day along with face stuff. Suffice to say, though, various workflows we get, as good a end result as we can get ready to upscale to 1080p. In my case, this was it. 102 4x576 and 81 frames long. Let's just look at that for a moment. What we have here is the classic issue of what I affectionately call faces at distance. Add in the fact that the camera is in motion and you have a challenge for the 3060 card or anyone who can't run above 720p. Now there's something I want to mention here because it's an interesting point to make. I discovered it revisiting some old research notes I had and reread this post on Reddit where I had a conversation with this chap about what he did in it. He ran tests, but not your usual tests. He ran 8 H100 servers at 100 steps on each model at highest resolution they could handle to compare results. Check out that post. But what interested me is the results. Skyreels reigned supreme. Skyreels? No one uses Skyreels. So what's the deal? Well above 720p, WAN doesn't really go. It does, but does it? Never seen a WAN 2.1 1080p model because I have seen 720p. But Skyreels excels above 900p according to this guy. This is food for thought, and I mention it here mostly to remind myself to look into it when I forget all about it later. Moving on. So looking at the quality issues of this 1024 by 576 by 81 frame video clip, and you can see the punched in faces effect, as I like to call it. I'll show you some more of that shortly, but you probably know all about it yourself. Will Smith certainly heard all about it here. Did you see this recently mistake? Will Smith's team or YouTube or someone thought they could use AI to fake crowd scenes and got caught out because punched in faces they should have talked to E. Anyway, and now let's talk about solving it, and for an added bonus I will talk about a new workflow method I literally just tested this morning that adds even more polish on it, but I will discuss that at the end. First, let's now look at my current upscaling method for fixing faces at distance. Finally, I hear you are. And dead it is, this 6-0'd by 900 by 81 frames. 2.2 low noise model upscaler. It runs on a 3060, but will take the better part of 30 minutes. Now, let's take the rest of the time and talk about this workflow. You can see I have settled on 0.3 for the denoise value, which is pretty important. If you have a T2V model of any kind in the main model, it could be a 1 2.1 or 1 2.2 or whatever. But if you're using T2V on a video and your denoise is between 0.1 to 0.79, you are able to keep similar result as what you put in. But the T2V model will apply its magic. This makes it an upscaler or a polisher workflow. 0.1 to 0.3, polishing with minor fixes. 0.4 up to 0.79, stronger upscaling fixes. 0.8 and above, you will completely change the video. It might do the inbound video structure, or it will more likely vote the prompt. But for our purposes, we stay below 0.79, and because we have characters we don't want to lose, probably better staying low. I went with 0.3 because it's a tricky shot that needed to fix the faces at a distance. If you saw my previous video on this, here is the example of fixing faces at a distance where I used
0.79 denoise and one 2.1 model.
That is how I first used it, to fix faces in a crowd. Notoriously difficult for low VRAM cards. I managed 41 frames with a one 2.1 model, but with a few more tweaks. I got one 2.2 low noise model to take me all the way to 81 frames. I get when loading the clip model or whatever, but I just press run there and it pushes through. Then I go make a cup of tea and watch a telly.
But our shot is probably the most difficult because it's a camera motion moving quickly backward, and so it's not like the model just has to focus on composition.
This is a big challenge, but it does okay, I think.
I don't even comparing our models to the subscription models because it's comparing a Mini to a Ferrari. But if you look at Kling or the ones I have seen, it blurs the background a bit, and I suspect it does that to avoid the challenge of rendering faces at a distance.
Could be wrong. You be the judge.
Let's finish talking about the workflow.
Sorry, I try to illustrate 80 video at a time and not meander off into mad skits. But the damn Vibe voice is changing the voices and throwing in music. I think it's haunted. My apologies. So what else about this workflow? I am using Fast 1 and LightX2V to speed it up. I don't see a problem using those in the upscaler at 0.3 denoise because I don't think it's going to affect the result much, but it will help with the speed. And just for shits and giggles, I threw in the Realism Booter and Details Enhancer, and I swear to God I have no idea if these even work, but we got swept up in the Fusion X hype train and they come from that. Fusion X, if you didn't know, was just 6 Loras baked into a WAN 2.0 model. Yes, that is all it was originally. Good, but really, just some Loras. But again, free and fresh off the press tip here, guys. But if you are using WAN 2.2 models, then MPS and HPS Loras just came out literally a day ago. Give them well. These are reward Loras, and what that means is... I have a clue. But word on the street is MPS Lora boosts average image quality and objective score. HPS Lora boosts human perceived aesthetic subjective score. Both are add-on Loras for WAN 2.0 tasting to improve results, but seem work in some case for 2.2 stuff. Remember, test and measure, guys. Test and measure. We have the GGUF clip model, which, as I spoke about before, is a trick for saving memory in the wrapper workflows, which this is also works in the native workflows, but it's easier to apply there. The video load is where I would load in my 5500 paint DP video that I showed you earlier. You really do want to get it as good as you can before coming into this upscaler, just on principle. But for speed, you could indeed try throwing in some crappy 180p results and then vase your boys back in again after. If I was fixing properly punched in faces like Will Smith's awful crowd attempt, I would push the denoise to 0.79. But for just a bit of minor fixing and polishing, I go between 0.9 and 0.3 as a start point. Also test a few frames first, preferably the worst ones, faces at distance, and base it on that, because at 1600 by 900 on a 3060 card, you will be waiting at least 30 minutes to see 81 frames. Note also here that I am working to 16 frames per second still, because 24 frames per second would require 121 frames to get 5 seconds of footage. And the last thing to talk about in this workflow is the model and the block swap. The model initially I used WAN 2.1 model, but now I use WAN 2.2 low noise model and the FP8E5 M2 because I like using it, but you could just as easily use the GGUF model, and to match this, probably get yourself a Q6 or Q5 KM. I wouldn't go lower, but it probably would not matter if you did, since this is polishing, not creating. When I first tested it, GGUF models did not work in KeyGI wrapper workflows, but now they do, so use what you want. I haven't ever tried an image to video model. I only use text to video models in my biscalers, and I don't even know why. But why change it if it ain't broke? And of course block swaps, and you can't see it, but the torch node on default, because I have PyTorch 2.7, and you really will need those things in to make this workflow run at all. You also probably want Sage Attention for the main model, if you don't have Sage Attention. I only have version 1, but if you don't have it set that to SDPA in the main model, FP16 or BF16 will do it. I guess I could set it to FP16.fast, but haven't. And that is it. We are hitting ridiculous overtime here. I am sorry I didn't even muck about in this one trying to save time, but let me now jump quickly to this morning's fun little discovery where I will of course share both upscaler workflows in the link of this video. But check this out. I spent weeks trying to get USDU, which is Ultimate SD Upscale, that I am sure you are familiar with because it is great for image upscaling, but I never got it working for video. It took too damn long. So checking Reddit this morning and I saw this and I thought, no way that's going to work for a 12GB VRAM card like they claimed. Sure enough, first go, 2.5 hours. Meh. So I went back to give them a dressing down. And they said, but did you do 65 frames or 89 frames? And I thought, oh, that'll make a nig enough difference. But to prove the point, I went back and did 65 frames and 22 minutes. Holy moly, Batman! That was the first time I ever got a USDU workflow to work with a video. So given the denoise they use here in the USDU is only 0.08 clever, old me went do it twice, then put it together in Shotcut, and sure enough, I got this. Okay, you probably can't see any difference at all here, but I can, because this with just a slight better blur structure on the distance faces. It's very, very minimal, but it is there. But I only got hold of this workflow this morning, and it uses a different approach to what I have done up until now, because this takes your 1080p final size and applies the USDU to that. Crazy. Why did I never think to do that? I don't know. But I need to experiment further, and you guys will be the first to hear about results on that. Leave it with me. So what next? Well, I'm now off to watch a video on SV2 because someone I trust claims it can do lip sync better than Infinite Talk. We shall see. Next video, I won't make any claims other than there will be one. Probably about the FFLF workflow that I stripped from this one. I'm done. I am sure you are too. See you next time. Ciao for now, Bambinos. Don't you go changing just to please me.